Marriage in medieval Europe, a prison built of politics, power, and pain. Forget what you know about romance. In medieval Europe, marriage was not about love. It was about control, wealth, and alliances. For most of history, marriage was a contract, not a connection, and at its heart was the systematic dehumanization of women and girls, who were bought, sold, and bound to men through force, ritual, and law. 1. Childhood as currency. Arranged marriages and lost innocence. Children in medieval Europe, especially girls, had no say in their futures. From as young as 5 or 6 years old, they were betrothed, that is, promised in marriage to another child or adult based on what their families could gain. In noble circles, these were strategic moves, securing alliances or titles. In peasant families, marriage often meant gaining a strong laborer, access to another family's tools, or merging tiny plots of land for survival. Betrothals could be legally binding, and breaking them was considered a serious offense, sometimes resulting in lawsuits or social ruin. Girls were often married by age 12 or 13, long before they had developed physically or emotionally. Example: Eleanor of Aquitaine was married at age 15 to the future King of France. Her life became one of constant manipulation. Her lands, her body, and her womb were treated as instruments of state. 2. Dowries and bride prices. The business of women marriage was an economic transaction. A dowry was money, property, or goods given by the bride's family to the groom. A bride price was money paid to the bride's family for giving her up. In both cases, the woman herself had no control over this exchange. Her body was part of a financial deal, and often the only leverage her family had. Families without daughters had fewer opportunities to build alliances or gain wealth. Daughters were seen as investments, ones that could go bad if they didn't produce heirs, or were seen as spoiled goods. 3. Consent under duress. The illusion of choice. While the church officially required free consent from both parties, in practice this was a sham. Girls were pressured, coerced, or beaten into saying yes. Families physically dragged daughters to the altar. Children who resisted were punished or disowned. A whispered yes under threat of shame. Starvation or violence was enough to make the marriage canonically valid and legally binding. Once married, a girl became her husband's legal property. Law example: under medieval common law, a husband could legally discipline his wife. She could not own property, initiate divorce, or even choose her own clothing in many cases. 4. The wedding ceremony, a performance of ownership. Marriage was a public spectacle, with every step reinforcing the woman's inferior legal status. The ceremony often took place outside the church, emphasizing the legal, not spiritual nature of the union. The bride stood on the left, the position of inferiority. She was given away by her father, an actual transfer of ownership. The ring symbolized not love, but possession. Even symbols we consider romantic today had dark roots. The veil was used to hide the bride's face, either to protect her identity or because her feelings didn't matter. The best man originated as the groom's armed companion, ready to capture or guard the bride if necessary. 5. The wedding night. Virginity, violence, and public shame. Marriage culminated in the consummation ritual, the first sexual act, which was often forced, especially with child brides. Virginity was proof of purity, a form of family honor. Bloodstained sheets were sometimes displayed to guests or in-laws. If a girl failed to bleed, she could be accused of deception and old, or were executed in some extreme cultures. True story. In 14th century France, a nobleman sued his wife's family after failing to find blood on the wedding sheets. The case was tried in court, and the girl's reputation and her life hung in the balance. 6. Gest permet noctis, the lord's right to repay. Horrifying practice, known as droit du seigneur, the right of the first night, allegedly gave feudal lords the right to sleep with any peasant bride on her wedding night. Though debated by historians, records from France, Scotland, and Germany show evidence of peasants paying fines to avoid the practice, local legends and legal disputes referencing it, clergy issuing condemnations or bans of the behavior, whether symbolic or actual. The fear of it reveals a chilling truth. In the medieval world, a woman's body belonged to the men who controlled her. 7. The bedding ceremony. Institutionalized humiliation. In some regions, the bedding ceremony was conducted publicly. Guests marched the couple to bed, shouting vulgar jokes. Clothes were forcibly removed by relatives or friends. In some cases, people remained in the room to witness the act. This wasn't done in finette was meant to ensure the marriage was sexually consummated. Without it, the union could be annulled. The ritual turned one of life's most intimate moments into a state and church-mandated violation. 8. Motherhood or death. The life of a married woman. Marriage marked the beginning of a life of endless childbirth, servitude, and danger. Women were expected to bear as many children as possible, especially sons. Infant mortality was high, but so was maternal mortality. Childbirth was often deadly. With no birth control, no antibiotics, and no surgical options, every pregnancy was a life-threatening event. If a woman failed to conceive, she was often blamed, shamed, or discarded. A barren woman had no value in the medieval system. Some women gave birth to 10, 12, even 20 children, with most dying in infancy or early childhood. 9. Divorce. Unthinkable, the Catholic Church strictly forbade divorce. The only escape was annulment, granted only for non-consummation, difficult to prove pre-existing marriage. Close familial relation, abuse, cruelty, or neglect were not valid grounds. Wives were expected to submit to their husbands, regardless of treatment. Women who ran away were hunted down. Refusal to obey one's husband could lead to excommunication, starvation, or execution. In rare cases, women were locked away in convents, but often only if they came from noble families. 10. Brutal alternatives. Trial by combat and public judgment. Some parts of medieval Germany. If a couple insisted on separation and couldn't get an annulment, they could engage in trial by combat. The man fought with one hand tied behind his back. The woman stood in a pit and used a rock or club. Whoever won legally ended the marriage. Loser could be executed or exiled. This gruesome ritual showed how little room medieval people had to escape their circumstances. Even death seemed preferable to lifelong entrapment. Conclusion. A system of state-sanctioned slavery. Medieval marriage was not sacred. It was a system of institutionalized oppression, upheld by the church, enforced by law, and embedded in every level of society. Women were traded, abused, raped, and killed, all in the name of duty and honor. Today's idea of marriage as a loving partnership is radically new. For most of human history, marriage was a prison, and women were the prisoners with no escape but death or obedience.